For today, in the name of freedom, we take the battle to them.
Hello and welcome to my ranking of all of the Fox X-Men movies. There are, I believe, 11 of them, and they vary in quality, let's just say. So, obviously, let's just go through them in chronological order. There's X-Men from 2000, of course, the original. There's X2, X-Men United, X-Men The Last Stand, X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men First Class, The Wolverine, X-Men Days of Future Past, Deadpool, X-Men Apocalypse, Logan, Deadpool 2, and Dark Phoenix. Obviously, next week we will see the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, which is going to be basically the Spider-Man No Way Home of the Fox X-Men movies. And I think this is really what has caused a lot of people recently, myself included, to watch all of these movies this year. And boy, let's just get into the rankings, starting off with what is undoubtedly, in my opinion, the worst one yet. Last place for me is undoubtedly Dark Phoenix, a movie which is so bad they didn't even put the words X-Men in front of it and just simply called it Dark Phoenix. Now, I know what you thought was going to be in last place. Don't worry, it's close, but Dark Phoenix to me is in last place for several reasons, but mainly the fact that this movie was worse for me than a lot of people, because I know a lot of people that watched the X-Men movies as they came out. And The Last Stand was released in, I believe, 2006. So that means, there was a 13-year gap between The Last Stand and Dark Phoenix. Now, imagine you watch The Last Stand and then 13 years later you watch the exact same movie done worse. You would feel annoyed. How do you think I felt when I watched all the movies in the span of maybe a week? Meaning that I saw The Last Stand, a movie which I wasn't crazy about, and then watched what was basically a worse, bland, boring remake of it, like 3 days later. Okay? It was terrible. This is probably one of the most boring movies I have ever seen. And you can just see that, honestly, apart from Michael Fassbender, who always gives it his all, despite, whether the movie is shit or not, he will always give it his best performance. Apart from him, the cast does not care at all. And it's clear why, obviously, because this was released just after Disney had bought Fox. So this universe was going to be over. And you can just see that the actors didn't really care anymore. And yeah, it was basically an atrocious movie. It was insufferable. It was boring. And yeah, they took the Phoenix storyline and they somehow made it worse than The Last Stand, even though in that movie, it wasn't even the main focal point. But yeah, so last place for me is undoubtedly going to be Dark Phoenix. In 10th place, we have what most people will put in last place, and that is X-Men Origins Wolverine. This was just, it was atrocious. It really, really was. It's so cheesy, corny, and usually that would be, you'd have like a guilty pleasure watching it. But this movie is just really, really boring. And the characters just aren't it. Like the main love interest that Wolverine had, I don't know her name, but she wasn't very important. And then on top of that, Sabretooth just like barely did anything. Leo Stryver was in Scream 3, which is and Scream 2, but he was in those two movies. And, when I saw his face, I was like, oh my God, it's him. It's Cotton Weary. And then he didn't really do much in the grand scheme of things. He was a better Sabretooth, I think, than Tyler Mane. But that's just because Liev Schreiber's version was a bit more of a character. And I'm really hoping that he is going to be in Deadpool and Wolverine. Probably the main topic is the character of Deadpool. Because obviously, even though this is Wolverine's movie, the thing that most people talk about is Deadpool. because in this movie, Deadpool is just a disgrace. It's the opposite of what he should be. Don't get me wrong, I really like the idea of what they did because they're like, oh, Muck with a mouth gets his mouth sewn shut. I really like that idea, but just for the character of Deadpool, you have Ryan Reynolds and just that boring design. It's so plain and unoriginal. And then on top of that, you have things that don't even make sense, like the adamantium katanas coming out of his arms. How does that work? How does he bend his elbows and get the katanas out? It doesn't make sense, obviously. But I mean, Wolverine can turn his wrist, so who actually cares? But yeah, the effects in this movie as well are just absolutely god awful. Mainly on Wolverine's claws, they look so bad. They look like foam. The foam ones that I made, which I made a video on, if you want to check that out. The foam claws I made look better than the claws in the movie. They look so bad. There's no reflection on them. They just look like foam or plastic. It looks terrible. And yeah, I mean the explosions. Obviously, let's just not even begin to get into that. But yeah, I also think a big issue with this movie is how they handled Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Wolverine is badass because Hugh Jackman is badass. When you try to make the character awesome and look like a boss, that is when it just becomes cheesy. Hugh Jackman was not the Wolverine we know in this movie, and honestly, I'm glad that Days of Future Past retconned this film. And really, for Deadpool and Wolverine, there's not really any plot necessary reason. That doesn't make sense. There's no reason to watch this film, but I think it is probably the most important in terms of the jokes that Deadpool will make, because when it comes to referencing old movies and making jokes about them, he tends to pick on X-Men Origins a lot, because obviously that's where Ryan Reynolds first showed up as Deadpool. So yeah, second last place is undoubtedly X-Men Origins Wolverine. My apologies, I did not watch the New Mutants, so technically this is there's 10 of them. So that was 10 and 9. So now number 8 is going to be X-Men The Last Stand. There's reasons as to why this movie is lower than, a few others on this list, but mainly just the fact that it has the Spider-Man 3 problem with it being like too overcrowded. They tried doing too many storylines in one movie, mainly two very big things. The Dark Phoenix storyline, which obviously is probably, let's be honest, the most iconic one in X-Men. And then they tried doing the whole Cure story, which really, it feels like both stories were pushed to the side because the movie didn't know what it wanted to focus on. You had obviously Logan and Professor X and all of them focusing on Jean, but then you had like Beast, Rogue, and Iceman who are like focusing on the Cure and things, and it just felt like a bit too much. This is also the movie where they kill off Cyclops, which I know pissed a lot of people off, but I mean, I only knew them from this franchise, so I was kind of happy because he was annoying me. But I mean, really, this movie is not terrible. The first two that I spoke about were what I would say are terrible. From here onwards, it's okay. So yeah, again, The Last Stand. It is a very messy movie. They tried doing way too much. But yeah, characters from this movie that will be coming back in Deadpool and Wolverine. There's Callisto who's coming back. And I actually think that is it. And actually, I think the other dude that might come back is the one who was like shooting his bones at Wolverine. So yeah, this movie was just really just wasted potential, because if this had been a solid film, then we would have had a great trilogy with this X-Men run. So yeah, unfortunately, The Last Stand just kind of botched every storyline it tried to go for. And yeah, I guess the best part about the movie was just Sir Ian McKellen and how fucking awesome he is. And of course the scene when Charles dies, because that was pretty sad, to be honest. Mainly the aftermath, because we actually get to see Wolverine break down, which is something I never thought we would ever see. So, yeah, number 8 is X-Men The Last Stand. Then we have in 7th place X-Men Apocalypse. This, I know, is probably the movie that most people look at when they think of wasted potential in this franchise, because Apocalypse is probably one of the most powerful mutants because he possesses so many abilities. It is actually crazy. Of course, he is like the original mutant, and you have Oscar Isaac playing him, who, yes, in recent years has redeemed himself at Marvel with Moon Knight, definitely being one of their best Disney Plus shows. But as far as a first run goes, they really wasted this man. And, you know, it is just shocking because I absolutely love the design of Apocalypse in this movie. I know that he's supposed to be like this huge hulking figure, kind of like Hulk, but really, oh my God, I just realized what I just said. But yeah, he's supposed to be huge, massive, and this time he was basically just human size. But I guess they sort of kind of tried to save themselves in the final act of the movie when he's battling Charles in his mind and he becomes huge. But yeah, the makeup and everything was fantastic, but the character of Apocalypse was just so boring. He was basically just a stone-faced maniac, and the Four Horsemen, I think, were absolutely pathetic. But as usual, this movie does have one redeeming quality, and that is the character of Magneto. And you will see me mention this in basically every single movie with Magneto in it, is that Michael Fassbender carries. All right, he carries. And you know, the thing is, I hate it in movies when you have characters that constantly flip-flop from good to bad, from good to bad, from good to bad. I think a good recent example is Ryan from The Boys. And I know that I'm not the only person. I've seen, you know, obviously I've got on the subreddit, everything. Everyone just hates how Ryan constantly flip-flops from between Butcher and Homelander. You know, he's like, oh, I love my dad. Oh, Butcher, he's mean. And then he just flip-flops, you know. It's the most sickening thing. But with Michael Fassbender's Magneto, it's the only character that actually makes sense, because when you watch it happen, you know, you just sit there thinking, oh, I can't blame Eric. I cannot blame him, because every movie something happens to him. And in this movie, you have one of the saddest scenes in this franchise when Magneto has given up being Magneto. He's just, you know, he's just Eric. He's working his job, you know, he has a wife, he has a daughter, and he's living a good life. And then obviously someone was about to die at his workplace, so he saved them. And in return for saving someone's life, he lost his family. So completely warranted on Eric's half for him to just, you know, go, yeah, you know what, fuck humans, you all deserve to die. So yeah, I completely agree with him there. But I think another aspect with Magneto that this, well, I say another aspect, one aspect with Magneto in this movie I didn't like was the fact that they never they never had him and Peter realize, oh, you know, be family, or like him realize that oh my fucking God, they never had Eric realize that Peter is his son. God, that was hard to say. Yeah, I don't really like that aspect of it. But I think apart from that, Magneto is still the one good consistent thing in all of these movies. But yeah, apart from that, the characters like Storm, like Angel, like Psylocke, they were pretty useless. And, you know, others like Havoc, it's a shame that Havoc died. But yeah, obviously this is the movie that introduced Scott and Jean, who really in this movie don't do a whole lot. And yet it's still more than they did in the first two X-Men movies. Again, this movie is not terrible. I would not say Apocalypse is terrible, but it's just wasted potential. And I think the main reason why this movie is higher than The Last Stand is just because of one emotional scene, and that is obviously Eric's family dying. That is just one of the best done scenes in these movies, and that's the main reason why it is higher than X-Men The Last Stand. Next up, we have The Wolverine from 2013. This was Hugh Jackman's second shot at a Wolverine solo film, and they mostly got it. The reason why I say mostly is because I think a lot of people will agree that the first two acts of this movie are decent to pretty good. But the last act is just horrendous. I don't know, this movie, just the movie as a whole, to me, it felt kind of slow and didn't really hit, because it was basically just him trying to keep this woman safe. And I don't know, it didn't really feel like anything that I should care about. It is still infinitely better than X-Men Origins Wolverine, since this movie does have some pretty cool action sequences, including the train fight, which that is really awesome how they had Wolverine like use his claws to his advantage in that scene. And yeah, Hugh Jackman in this movie he really lives up to his name. He is jacked. I think a lot of people would agree. This is probably the movie where he looks best. His body is just insane in this film. But yeah, again, it's not terrible. Definitely better than X-Men Apocalypse. But yeah, it's not the type of movie that I really enjoy. Okay, that's being a bit negative. But yeah, again, it's just a bit slow. And really, they could have done so much better in that third act. It's crazy how we had that amazing opening sequence of, the bombing in Japan with Wolverine saving that guy. And then you just get to the end where it's like, oh yeah, look at this goofy de-aging shit. It was terrible. But we do have the post-credit scene, which obviously is definitely a fan pleaser, with Professor X coming back, and of course, Eric Lenscher. There's also something that I just kind of want to try and clear up. Obviously, a lot of people, myself included, are very confused as to how Professor X came back, because obviously, yes, he transferred his consciousness into another person, but that means that other person would, they'd still look like themselves. So how did Professor X end up looking just like Sir Patrick Stewart? Well, my only explanation is, ironically, from X-Men Apocalypse. Because in that movie, every body that Apocalypse transfers his consciousness into, every body that he takes over, ends up looking exactly the same. So my only explanation is that the same thing happens here. If Professor X transfers his consciousness into somebody else and he takes over their body will transform to look like him. So yeah, that I guess is the only explanation for Professor X looking exactly the same. Obviously, this is still a mistake because this came out way before X-Men Apocalypse, so it is still a plot hole. But I'm just saying, looking at it in retrospect, it does make sense. So there you go. Number 5, the midway, is The Wolverine. And actually, you know what? Looking at it now, I just realized this movie has the exact same release date as Deadpool and Wolverine, the 26th of July. So yeah. Number 5, sorry. That was number 6. I really fucked up the numbering. But yeah, number 5 is going to be X2, X-Men United. I know people love this movie. I know they really, really, really love it. But I don't really understand that godly praise that it gets as one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. It's good. Don't get me wrong. It is really good, which is why it's number 5. But there's just certain aspects to it that I didn't really find that fascinating. Mainly the whole Colonel Stryker thing, but obviously you're not gonna, he is the perfect type of villain to have in a movie like this. And I'm glad that they really introduced the first aspects, or like the little breadcrumbs of Wolverine's backstory in this movie. The action is definitely turned up a lot, which is probably why people love this movie a lot. But yeah, this is mainly just a really fun watch. The characters, I love when the villains end up helping the heroes, so obviously Magneto and Mystique helping Logan and them is just so fun to me. The only thing that bogs this movie down is that I think they really just pushed Professor X to the side, and that whole thing went on for way too long. It felt like I was watching the final battle of Avatar 2, where it just went on and on and on, and just save the dude, just stop this. I don't know. That could just be me, but yeah, I don't know. Apart from that, most of the movie was really good, and I mean, let's be honest, that opening sequence is probably one of the coolest scenes in this franchise. But yeah, really, really solid sequel to the original, and that is X2 X-Men United. Number 4 is the original X-Men from 2000. I know that putting this movie above X2 is probably crazy to a lot of you, and to be honest with you, this could change. It really, really could. It depends on if I ever watch these movies again. It could change because when I watch things again, obviously I tend to become biased to that one movie. So like now, if I watch like X-Men: The Last Stand, for example, I'd be like, this movie is actually pretty good, and it could go up like 3 places. So now I've watched all of them once, so it's a fair judgment. But as of right now, X-Men from 2000 is number 4. And this movie is just really, really good. And it's easy to see why this is what sparked the whole comic book movie thing. Obviously, I know that it's not like the first comic book movie, but it's the first one that made people realize, holy shit, it can be done. We can have great comic book movies. And, a lot of people give that credit to Spider-Man from 2002. But really, it is from the original X-Men from 2000. And yes, this movie is dated. Yes, it is cheesy, it's corny. But damn, is it a lot of fun. This is just, to me, it was a lot more fun than X2. But that, again, that's just personal preference. I think that Magneto in this movie, I know I didn't speak much about him in X2, but that's simply so I could glaze him over here. Magneto is just absolutely fantastic. This movie is probably the movie where I enjoy Sir Ian McKellen's Magneto the most. He is just an amazing actor, and I love listening to him and Professor X speak. Just listening to Sir Ian McKellen and Sir Patrick Stewart speak to each other, they sound so similar, but it's just so nice to listen to, especially in their first scene together. It's brilliant. And I think that really this movie just goes to show that you don't need like amazing CGI to make some things look good. Because yes, I know it was a pain, but Rebecca Romijn's Mystique is one of the coolest looking characters I've ever seen. Because the amount of makeup and prosthetics that went onto her, it's immaculate. It really, really is. And obviously, it's a pain to do it today. Today, they would just CGI in Mystique. But it looked amazing in 2000. And this was 24 years ago. But yeah, the only negatives I can give this movie is obviously the freaking, whatchamacallit, the line. You know the line. What happens when a toad gets struck by lightning? Same thing happens to everyone else. Fucking hell, that is so bad. This movie also, I think, wasted Darth Maul. Terribly. They wasted him. Yes, I know that Darth Maul is coming back as Toad in Deadpool and Wolverine, but in this movie, he is such an annoying character. He's barely in it, but he's just so weird. And I mean, apart from that, there's not really much that I can give this movie in terms of negatives. So fourth place is the original X-Men. Third place, we've entered the top 3. Third place is going to be Logan. This is probably the best film here. And, I was watching Koi Genre's ranking of all the X-Men movies. And, that is probably my favorite video on the Real Rejects channel, because I love this franchise. And listening to Koi just, go on and on, you can see how much he cares about these films, and that is what I love. I don't really like it when people are like, oh, well, actually, I know more about this than you in the comics. So I hate it when people do that. But with Koi, you could just see how much he loves these things. And he made a really good point of something that I never even thought of. And it's that when you say movie, there's a certain energy to it. But when you say film, there's a certain energy to it. The other X-Men movies are movies. This is a film. This is an amazing film. And it's so different from the previous films, because I was just talking about X-Men from 2000 and how corny and cheesy it is with like the bad CGI and all of that. But this movie is so dark, it's so serious, it's so depressing, and it's emotional. And this is probably why this movie is so high up on this list. And I know for a lot of people, including Koi himself, this is the best X-Men film. But I have a weird relationship with this movie, which is really going to piss you off once I tell you. So, obviously, I had heard like godly things about this film, that it was like one of the best things ever created. So, this year, the first two movies that I watched were Deadpool and Deadpool 2. And obviously, I knew that Wolverine died in Logan. You know, how could I not? But I did not know that this was like the Avengers Endgame of the X-Men franchise. So I turned to the Marvel subreddit and I was like, listen, I haven't seen any X-Men movies apart from Deadpool and Deadpool 2. So can I watch Logan? And they said, yes, it's completely separate. That is the worst thing I possibly could have done, because I did not know anything about Wolverine other than that he can heal and that he has claws. And looking at this movie, now that because I didn't really care for this movie when I first watched it, I was like, it really is just a boring movie. But now watching it, knowing the history between Professor X, you know, and Logan, knowing Logan, what he's been through, what Professor X has been through, seeing that all the X-Men have died, and just seeing what Wolverine was in his prime, now I understand what this movie really was. It was a heartfelt, emotional send-off to the character of Wolverine. And it was absolutely brilliant. And I'm glad that this got the R rating, because I really don't think you could have done this movie PG-13. I don't think so. And that's probably one of the first things you notice, because the first thing you see in the movie is Wolverine fighting off these guys that are shooting at him. You know, you see him cut their arms off, cut their heads off, stab them. You know, it's violent. And that, I think, is what works for this movie, because it's dark, it's gritty, and this is the perfect example of a slow movie, but it works. I know that when I put the Wolverine so low and said that it was slow, there's a bunch of you that were thinking that I just like the big action movies, which, yes, obviously I do like them, but it depends on the mood that I'm in. And this movie is one that I really, really respect. Logan is something that we will probably never get again, and I really do just wish that a lot of comic book movies nowadays were on this level. In fact, before I actually, as soon as I was done watching all the X-Men movies, this movie was number 5. It was below X2. But obviously I simply cannot put this movie so low. It is genuinely fantastic and has what is, in my opinion, one of the saddest, I don't know why I'm saying my opinion. It is one of the saddest deaths in comic book history. And in my opinion, is sadder than Iron Man's death, because this was just absolutely horrific to watch. It was so emotionally draining, because you have Laura there just holding Wolverine's hand, which really does call back to the Wolverine. You know, when Yukio said that she had like a vision, obviously she can see the future, of like, oh, you're holding your heart in your hands, and that's exactly what happened. He's holding Laura's hand as he's dying, and that is just a heartbreaking scene. I don't think there's anyone who can watch Logan and not just burst into tears when they see him die, because, you know, he was a father, he was basically a son to Professor X, and yeah, it's just, that is where the X-Men franchise ended for a lot of people. And it is annoying that Dark Phoenix came out, because it shouldn't have happened. And I understand why many people were upset that Hugh Jackman was coming back as Wolverine, because of course this is the perfect send-off movie for him. But I'm glad they're not touching it. And I'm glad that Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman know the effect this movie had on people. So, yes, obviously, the one in Deadpool and Wolverine, thank God, is a variant. So, yeah, that was enough fucking hell of Logan. Let's move on to the runner-up. Number 2, which is a movie which really was number 1 for so long. And that is X-Men First Class. This film is brilliant. I absolutely love this. And, you know, I probably should have said it with Logan, but these top 3 are all 10 out of 10s. These films are absolutely amazing. And I don't even know where to start with First Class. Probably the opening, because of course this does call back to the original X-Men, which did open with Eric Lenscher, and obviously that whole backstory of him in the Nazi camp. But it carried on. It showed Kevin Bacon. It showed Sebastian Shaw, and he killed his mother and everything. And I think this is probably the first, this is the first thing that'll actually make us genuinely understand everything that Magneto has been through. Because Michael Fassbender he's an amazing actor. He really is. And I think that he steals this movie. He steals the spotlight. But yeah, his relationship with Charles in this film is just absolutely brilliant. I love how they really were like brothers. And obviously you get little hints of that in the original X-Men trilogy. You know that these two were friends, but you don't know what they've actually been through. And this movie is just absolutely fantastic. It really does feel like an X-Men movie, because the others, obviously Wolverine is like one of my favorite superheroes, but he does steal the spotlight a fair amount. And in this movie, yes, he has a cameo, but he doesn't steal the film from the X-Men. And that is probably why people love this one so much, is because it's the first movie where we actually see, you know, a good amount of focus on all of the X-Men, and they work together as a team. But yeah, this movie was very much Eric and Charles focused, but goddamn was it amazing. Really, I can only give this movie one negative, and that is that I just don't like that Jennifer Lawrence is in this movie so much. Mystique is supposed to be a side character. She does not have enough to justify her essentially stealing the show. And I think just the fact that they cast Jennifer Lawrence is that is the main fact. Because they got her, they're like, oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, she's the main character now. The rest of you can fuck off. So yeah, that is the only thing. And the fact that she mainly just plays Jennifer Lawrence for the whole movie, which the whole movie she's complaining that she has to hide who she really is, when she spends the whole movie as Jennifer Lawrence. Where's the logic? But yeah, I absolutely love this movie, and really the highlight of it, I think a lot of people will agree, one of the best scenes is the scene of the beach the beach in Cuba, because that is just where you see Eric truly just break, where he's like, you know, I've been at the I don't know what he says, something of men taking orders. Being under the oppression of men taking orders, I think he says. And he obviously gives the line of peace was never an option, which has become such a meme over the years, but people don't actually know where it comes from. But yeah, obviously that scene does end with Charles getting paralyzed. And I think that this was like the perfect prequel to the first X-Men movie. And not only that, it was absolutely phenomenal, because it did everything right. It had good, it had a good main cast. It had good writing, and it had decent antagonists. So yeah, runner-up is going to be X-Men First Class. But really, apart from First Class and Logan, who is not going to have number 1 be X-Men Days of Future Past? This is Avengers Endgame of the X-Men franchise, and it was absolutely amazing to see the old cast and the young cast come together, because even though they didn't, fight together, they weren't in a battle, you got to see Professor X meet himself, which really is like one of the best scenes in this franchise. It's emotional because James McAvoy is a fantastic actor, and really just goes to show that he doesn't get overshadowed by Michael Fassbender just because Fassbender is a better actor. They are both amazing, and I think they both play Professor X and Magneto equally well. And this movie is just absolutely amazing because they balance it really well with the young cast and the old cast. That, and of course they bring Wolverine back, but that's just not, but they use that for great comedic effect, I think. But this is probably the most fun of the X-Men films because you get characters like Quicksilver. Evan Peters' Quicksilver is probably one of the funniest characters in the X-Men franchise, and you get one of the best scenes, and that is the kitchen scene, obviously. Much better than the school scene from Apocalypse, in my opinion. I know that many people do love that one, but the kitchen scene to me just looks better. In Apocalypse, the people kind of look like cardboard cutouts. But one of the main reasons why this movie is higher up, because again, as I said, Days of Future Past and First Class are basically on the same level, same with Logan. But the only reason that this is number one is, first of all, obviously the premise of the movie, but mainly Mystique in this one is more Mystique and less Jennifer Lawrence, which I really, really enjoyed. But yeah, I don't think I could actually give this film any negatives. It was amazing. It wasn't slow. It was decently paced. The CGI was phenomenal. The premise was amazing. I absolutely loved it. And it was just so much fun. That's the only word I can use for it. It was fun. And it retcons, obviously, two of the worst movies in the franchise, that is X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine. But it's just genius. It really, really is. Again, another movie where Magneto is, you can understand him, of him being like just trying to preserve their future by killing Mystique. Again, a fair assumption to make, but obviously a bit drastic for Professor X, which is why, again, Eric does become the enemy. And I, again, like the way that they kind of interwove like real life events into this movie, like them thinking that Magneto killed, what's his name? JFK. They thought that he killed JFK, but then he goes, I was trying to protect him because he was one of us. They made JFK a mutant. Oh my God, this movie is just so freaking cool. Again, it felt like Avengers Endgame. So yeah, if I keep on praising this movie, we're gonna go on for ages. So number one is definitely X-Men Days of Future Past. And the title is just fucking brilliant. I absolutely love that. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is my ranking of all of the X-Men movies. I did not include Deadpool in this ranking, just because I feel like it I don't know, like it falls under X-Men, but it's kind of by itself. If I were going to insert them into this list, I would put Deadpool 2 at number 5. I think that movie is just so much, it's so goofy, but it's a lot of fun, and really it's a good sequel to the first film. But I do prefer the first film, which is why I would put the first Deadpool at number 3. I think it is an absolutely fantastic movie. For the budget they had, it looked great. The writing was amazing. It's one of the funniest comic book movies ever. And I can't give it any negatives apart from the villain. I do think, it's going to have to be number 4. I'm not putting it above Logan. But yeah, I think Francis was a pretty crappy villain. But yeah, it was so funny. It was heartfelt as well, because obviously the main reason why Deadpool wears the mask is not to protect his identity, but obviously he's afraid of people not liking him. He's afraid of not being loved. And, obviously that is human, that's how people feel. So yeah, Deadpool is an amazing movie. And that is why I'm going to put it just below Logan. I would put it at number 4. So yeah, that is my ranking of all the X-Men movies. And, you know, I'll include the Deadpool movies in there. Very interested to see where Deadpool and Wolverine will land up. It will either be like number 1 or it'll be like number 4 or something. So yeah, please let me know your thoughts on my ranking. Are you annoyed that I put X2 that low? But yeah, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Please leave a like, subscribe, and goodbye.